Welcome, viewers and listeners, to another edition of CHP Talks. On the morning after a disastrous evening, we're going to talk about what happened yesterday, what happened or didn't happen. And Kris Sims, who's joining us, is, as many of you know, Taxpayer Federation, Alberta Director. Just going to give you your intro here, Kris. She is the Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. She is a longtime journalist in Canada, one of the founding reporters for Sun News Network. She's worked in and around government for more than 20 years. She's been a frequent and much appreciated contributor to this program. She and Franco Terrazzano and others from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation host their own podcast, well worth listening to. I always listen to it. And their regular taxpayer magazine is top-notch. There's also a wealth of information on their website, taxpayer.com. I urge all our listeners, if you are not already a receiver of the Taxpayer magazine, to become a subscriber and a contributor. They do great work informing Canadians about how our taxes are being used and misused, and they are an advocacy group for more freedom through less government. And again, taxpayer.com. So, Kris, what a pleasure to have you here with us today again. And I'm on the road. I'll just let our listeners know I'm on the road the day after voting. My team and I are out gathering up signs from the hither and yon in this huge riding of Skeena-Bulkley Valley. It's about the size of Norway, and we have to get to quite a few corners to bring back the signs that we went to quite a few corners to put up just a few weeks ago. So, Kris, thanks for joining us. I know you were up late last night watching the action, and give us your first blush thoughts about what happened yesterday, what happened and didn't happen.
Well, thank you so much for the kind introduction. And I really can't think of a show I would rather start my day off with, honestly,
Thank you.
is talking with friends here on your show. And so last night, yes, I think it was a late night for a lot of folks who were covering the election. We were doing our own coverage there, kind of a hybrid with True North. And so I wanted to give people a little bit of encouragement off the bat because I think some folks are disappointed. I think it's really important to remember that in politics, there are never any guarantees. And so if you look at the results from the election compared to 6 months ago, you're going to get pretty sad if you wanted the Conservatives to win, if that was your view. However, if you look at them compared to what it was 6 weeks ago, then they fought back really hard. So folks are going to, who are more intricate than I am on this stuff, are going to dissect polls and whether or not they were accurate or if they're fair to even use during a writ period. Because a lot of folks are saying they were discouraged by polls and so maybe they didn't go out to vote. So I'll leave that up to the pollsters to decide. However, if you take a look at where the numbers were 6 weeks ago, it was calling for a huge blowout Liberal majority, et cetera, et cetera. And now the Conservatives have held them to a very small minority. As of right now, for recording time, we've got the Liberals at 168 seats, the Conservatives right behind them at 144 seats, and the Bloc carrying the bulk of the rest of the seats with 23. The NDP were reduced to 7. And Elizabeth May is, as of right now, holding on to her one single Green Party seat. So the makeup of the House of Commons is going to change substantially. And of course, as now everybody knows, most visibly, Pierre Poilievre lost his seat. So we can get into that a little bit more. But as far as looking at it from the 30,000-foot bird's eye view, in Ontario, the Conservatives gained a lot of ground. Like a lot. I think the last stat I saw is they got 1 million more votes than Doug Ford's provincial Conservatives. So same population, same province. Apparently the federal Conservatives got 1 million more votes than Doug Ford's team did just recently in their most recent provincial election.
You know, Doug Ford, it's, for those who care about conservative principles, I think he's been a huge disappointment to true blue conservatives in many ways, both socially and economically. So it's not surprising to me that his PCs in Ontario don't look that good compared to what happened federally. But to me, it's first of all the shift even from December, where it looked like the Conservatives were going to get a massive majority, till like you said, 6 weeks ago when the Liberals were riding really high. I find it so hard to understand how a thinking, rational human being could say, well, Justin Trudeau's messed things up really badly. The country's in a mess. What on earth are we going to do? Oh, all of a sudden, his advisor steps in and a globalist, kind of a person who's right up the same alley as Trudeau, and how people could swing over and say, well, this guy's going to be the solution to our problem. So did that surprise you, how that took place?
Unfortunately, no, it didn't surprise me. I was probably disappointed. So the Taxpayers Federation is nonpartisan. So if a party is going to give us lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government, and I would add on to that smaller government leading to more freedom, then that's what we're happy with. Looking at what was going on, considering what's happened the last few years, I wasn't actually surprised. Taking off my CTF hat and just putting on my human hat that's been in this arena for a long time, and I've read a lot of books on this stuff. When you get a voter population that is motivated more by fear, you will have them not digging into platforms as much as they otherwise would, if I can say that nicely. And so when you have someone who's as big a personality figure as US President Donald Trump, flinging things around like 51st state, you're not a real country, da 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 da. Those of us who've read his book, The Art of the Deal, or who follow, riding by riding, results out of the United States and who kind of get how he talks, I personally just saw that as bluster because he's trying to get a better deal for himself. So what he does, it's right in his book. He comes in, he knocks the water down off the dinner table, shakes it up a little bit, gets you unstable, and then takes advantage of that and gets a great deal for himself, which is what he's doing, but on an international stage. And so, inadvertently or not, when he made that statement, that frightened a lot of people. Like, it spooked a lot of people. It's really hard to shake people out of a sense of fear if they truly believe. Like, I was speaking to some people in the Maritimes. They truly believed that Donald Trump was about to roll tanks across the border. Like, they truly felt this way. These are educated people who watch the news. Yeah. So once they're there, that's you trying to talk to them about the fact that our debt has been doubled and that people can't afford food and shelter and fuel, and that up until 5 minutes ago, we were being unfairly punished with a terrible carbon tax. Trying to get kind of those policy points into them when they're frightened is pretty tough. All that is to say, US President Donald Trump is a wild card. He's unpredictable. He will say things that disrupts things. A good friend of mine described it this way, and I'm not a farmer, but he is, so I'm trying to quote him properly. He said, what's happened right now with the Conservatives, if you base it on 6 months ago versus 6 weeks ago, if you base it on 6 months ago, the Conservatives had a bumper crop. It was growing well. It was beautiful. Everything was ready to go. Harvest was going to happen any minute now, as soon as the government fell, any minute now, and all of a sudden a hailstorm hit. And Trump was that hailstorm. So now they're looking around trying to find crop insurance and figuring out what they can salvage and replanting for next time. So I think that's kind of where we're at. But again, looking at if you from a conservative perspective, and in this case, it was the Conservative Party that was promising to get rid of all carbon taxes, that was outlawing the idea of a home equity tax, lots of good stuff, getting rid of censorship. So if you wanted a conservative win, there are a lot of bright spots here. Andrew Lawton won his seat. Aaron Gunn won his seat. Jamil Javani won his seat. I think Matt Strauss also won his seat, who was also one of the folks who was pushing for more freedom and less lockdowns in Ontario. And Roman Baber, as far as I know, I think he has solidified his seat, which is a big deal to your point going back to Doug Ford. So there's a lot here. The main thing I think the party is going to have to do going forward, first things first, is find Pierre Poilievre a seat.
To me, that was the most surprising thing of the whole evening. I found it hard to believe that Pierre Poilievre, after riding that wave of popularity and enthusiasm across the country, I mean, you know that we have some differences. We in the Christian Heritage Party have some differences with Pierre Poilievre, and we pointed them out during the debates and so on, as mostly around pro-life issues and some of the gender things. We don't think he takes a strong enough stance. Also, even on the carbon tax, we think he doesn't go far enough. Of course, he goes way farther than Carney, but we think carbon needs to be defended. Carbon dioxide is not a poison, it's plant food. But anyway, those are all differences that we have. Nevertheless, having Mark Carney at the head of the government instead of Pierre Poilievre is, well, terrible news, I think, for most of us who care about, personal freedom and smaller government and so on. Again, Mark Carney promises to spend more than, I think, twice as much as Justin Trudeau, or at least he's going to increase the deficit by at least $100 billion over what Justin Trudeau was already going to do, and Justin Trudeau has been the deficit king. And Pierre Poilievre promised to reduce the deficit. He didn't promise to balance the budget. So, those are some of the differences. Nevertheless, to me, it was absolute shock to see Pierre Poilievre not get his own seat. So I know you know a little bit about how that might have happened, and maybe you want to comment on that.
Certainly. So I spent a lot of time with my husband and my children in Ottawa, and I worked on Parliament Hill. A big bulk of that time was when I was a producer and part-time host for 580 CFRA, which is talk radio. And back in the day, it was the talk radio. Lots of really cool opinions, people phoning in all the time, breaking news. It's much more corporate now. But at the time, it was the place to go. And I got to know the ridings in the areas around Ottawa. And so for folks who've only ever seen it on TV, Ottawa just looks like the Parliament buildings and a couple of fancy globe lights. But it's quite rural. If you drive for about 20 minutes max in pretty much any direction in Ottawa, you're in the country. Like you're in farmland. And that is why you will there's, upstart protest groups like the Lanark Landowners Association. It holds candles right to the Wild Rose type upstarts here in Alberta, very much into direct democracy, small government, individual rights. And so Pierre Poilievre's riding straddles, it's called Carleton. It used to be Nepean Carleton, but right now it's called Carleton. It straddles a chunk of what I would describe as pretty blue rural farmland and a huge swath of government employee neighborhoods. And I mean townhouse after townhouse after townhouse of government employees. So the reason why Pierre Poilievre was able to upset a sitting cabinet minister at the time, Minister Pratt, okay, who was a Liberal, when he was first elected in his 20s after being a staffer. The reason why he was able to do that is because he door knocked like every door himself in that riding. And he kind of kept that tradition going. And I'll give you an example. When he was a very busy cabinet minister under then Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and Prime Minister Stephen Harper lost the election to then incoming Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in 2015, Pierre Poilievre only won his riding, I think, by about 1,200 votes, which is very close. I think that's what he lost it by around there last night. All this to say, Pierre Poilievre wins that strange chimera of a riding only because he was the boots on the ground all the time. He was the one door knocking. He was always keeping an eye on the teams, all that stuff. Now he's been out for like 3 years, like you said, traveling Canada, speaking to people, having rallies, doing those real sit down interviews, like doing a lot of that you'd call groundwork as a political leader. And because he was vacant from that physically from the riding, I think that's what happened there. Now,
Well, I know,
yeah,
I can say since I became leader in 2014 of the Christian Heritage Party, I've had much less time to spend in this huge riding. I used to go to a lot of the towns and cities on my vacations even, and whatever, to get to know people, introduce myself to, pastors and others who cared about some of the same things. Since I've been the leader of the party, I've spent very little time away from either my home desk in Telqua or traveling the country. So I can identify with what you're saying about getting out in the communities.
that's exactly what happened. Pierre Poilievre was one of those, like as a producer for radio, if I was going to, a bake sale or an auction or some charity event, he was always there, always there. And also his provincial counterpart was often there as well. So it's a very hands-on sort of riding because it's that hybrid of keeping the government workers happy and those kind of grassroots folks who do expect you to show up to their tractor pull all the time. So I think that is what happened there. I'm sure it was a shock to him. It was sad to watch him last night, realizing that he fought, and I think they flipped or gained 20 or 25 seats, and he lost his own. So that's going to be tough. So I imagine if I were just I'm not part of it, but if I were in the room, I imagine what would be happening is they're trying to find a dark blue safe riding that he can just convince somebody to give to him so he can get a by-election notice going in there as fast as he possibly can. Probably in a dark blue safe seat, like Red Deer or something. And that way it's off his mind. He doesn't need to worry about getting elected back home. He can just focus on the task at hand. I will point out there's stranger things have happened. I mean, Prime Minister Winston Churchill lost his federal election in July of 1945. Like literally after just saving the world, they said nope, and they voted against him. So stranger things have happened.
I agree with you. That was another one of that even maybe a larger magnitude
Oh
because
yes, much larger.
the debt that the people of England owed to that man is unbelievable. And yeah,
And they voted him out. I couldn't reading the history book. You're saying really, and so I think Pierre Poilievre would appreciate the comparison, although it's not at all in the magnitude comparison. I'm not
right.
comparing this to this
So
anymore.
before we go, I know you have other events coming up today, other commitments, but before we part company today, I'd like you to talk about what Mark Carney and the Liberals are going to mean for taxpayers, maybe particularly Alberta taxpayers, but in general, we know we're going to pay a price. You and Franco have been warning diligently and informing the public diligently about what's at stake here, and yet the public, I guess those people in those various ridings in the East don't listen to your program because if they did, if they listened regularly, there's no way they would have voted Mark Carney in. So tell us in a short format what we can expect from this globalist who's now become the elected Prime Minister of Canada.
Okay, here we are, right? Okay, I'll try to be brief. And again, I would say this if this were a conservative that had this agenda. We gave Prime Minister Paul Martin the Tax Fighter Award because he slayed the deficit and he was liberal. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of good news. I have a lot of worries here, and that is based on what Mark Carney has said in his platform and also what he has said in his book, Values. I would strongly encourage people to either borrow it from the library if you don't want to give him money, or borrow it off a friend or something. Read Mark Carney's book entitled Values. It's got the planet Earth on the front with scaffolding around it. Not kidding. So some of the more alarming things in there were he wants to keep 80% of oil and gas in the ground. He thinks that 90% of the world's energy needs can very soon be met by only wind and solar. So not even going to nuclear or something more chemically dense. He believes in personal carbon emissions budgets for individuals. I have no idea what that means or how he would monitor that or what that is, but it's right there in his book.
Something like the social credit, something like the social credit score from China, I would guess.
It very well could be. And based on my reading and understanding of podcasts that I read, we probably listen to similar things. But I don't know. We need him to explain it. As far as his policy goes, it's right there in his platform. He is going to impose carbon tariffs. So folks were all worried about tariffs coming from Trump. Carney's creating his own. In this, I must stress, this is separate and apart from the industrial carbon tax. Okay. Mark Carney thinks carbon taxes are so important. He describes them as a cornerstone of his worldview, in his words. He sees them as so important that when he looks around the world and he finds a country that doesn't have a carbon tax, that upsets him. That upsets him so much that he is going to impose tariffs on that other country's exports into Canada, meaning we're all going to pay more. So in the platform, if people are looking for it, any journalists watching, it is called Border Adjustment Mechanism. That is government term for tariff. Border Adjustment Mechanism. They've costed it out, and so far, they're estimating it's going to cost Canadians $500 million more. What kind of products are going to be hit with the tariff? We don't know yet. But to give you an example, I just went shopping and I did a video explaining it to people. I just went shopping at Superstore and I showed pajamas that are made in Southeast Asia. No carbon tax there, so we're going to get nailed with it. Bananas from Central America. Again, no carbon tax from that origin country, so we're probably going to get nailed with it. Windex, I learned, is made in Wisconsin. So that America doesn't have a national carbon tax or an industrial carbon tax. So the carbon tax tariff is new. Carney is committed to it. It's in his platform, and it's going to cost us at least $500 million. Separate from that, the other big red flag we have is his industrial carbon tax. He said many times he's not axing the tax. He finds the notion laughable. He is going to change the carbon tax. He's going to shift it so it's industrial and it punishes our job creators and manufacturers and our industries. We'll still pay it. So a fuel refinery won't eat the cost of an industrial carbon tax. It'll pass it down per liter for gasoline and diesel. So you and I will be paying more again soon. The catch is we just don't know how much yet. So we're waiting to see if the parliamentary budget officer or a really big thinking economist does a good deep dive on this and wrenches some serious answers out of this man. Because frankly, he skated through a lot of this election without having to answer these really serious questions. I'm sorry. I wish I had better news.
No, well, Kris, I'm not surprised at the negative news, and I think it's good for our viewers and listeners to just be aware of what's coming down the track. None of us wanted to see this result last night, and it is the result we have. To me, how people could choose this, how the majority could choose this, I do not know. But it's a matter of worldview, and they have believed the wrong people. They've listened to the wrong programs. They should be listening to the Canadian Taxpayer Federation podcast, and they'd be a lot smarter.
Thank you.
But maybe if Mark Carney would listen to it once in a while, he'd be a lot smarter. But
You know, he's got his PhD in economics from Oxford, and I really wish I could lock him in a room with Franco sometimes because Franco has his master's in economics, and he's a really smart lad. And I wish you could bring him around. There's the other elements I know you have to go, but for folks to really watch for, he's fully in favor, unfortunately, of the censorship laws and for funding the media. So unfortunately, that vice grip of funding mainstream on one side and censoring the independents on the other, that vice grip on our free expression is unfortunately going to stay in place, but we will continue to fight it every single day. I don't think this current minority situation, if the seats stay the way they are, I don't think that's going to last as long as the last one did, because now, put it this way, Mr. Captain Canada, elbows up, Team Canada, has to do deals with the Bloc separatist party that wants to tear the country apart. So narratively wise, I don't know if that's going to last as long in the federal media for him.
Yeah, and we've had probably, I'm going to say this is a good thing. I don't know if we're supposed to rejoice at the downfall of others, but because of their terrible policies and the damage that they have caused to the country, I have to say I'm glad to see the NDP has been knocked off their perch. They have caused so much trouble, even just by propping up Justin Trudeau for so long, to get their little things that I mean, I shouldn't say little things, but dental plans and childcare things that they tout as what they've done for Canada. And when we talked to them in the debates here locally, when we talked about the national debt and all that, there was not an inkling of of a recognition that debt is a problem. No, it's just because as long as it's in the right proportion to the GDP, then it should be no big deal. And I've heard that frankly since Stephen Harper's days as well. That some economists kind of hold up this ratio and say we're doing fine. No, I say, if you are in debt like that and you tell your banker, don't worry about it. No, I have no plans to repay, but just think of it. My debt to GDP ratio is really good. So I don't think
that doesn't fly very well. To your point on the NDP, I don't know if they can go lower than 7 seats. I mean, I was predicting 4, but I was pretty pessimistic last night. So they'll only get bigger and stronger from here. Back in the day, very quickly, like Jack Layton was opposed to the carbon tax.
Okay.
Like vociferously opposed to the carbon tax. Right. I remember I booked him for shows back in 2008. Okay. So for Jagmeet Singh to just go along with this last government over and over and over again, allowing for the carbon tax to continuously punish working people for the sin of heating their home or driving to work or buying food, was, I think, really unconscionable. And I think it was unconscionable for a lot of our friends on the left as well, which is why you see this cratering in the support. So the next leader of the NDP, who knows who it could be, put a little bug in people's ear. Wab Kinew speaks French, eh? I did not know that until 2 months ago. And now it's been ringing a bell in my head ever since. So we'll see. We'll see who comes to the fore to try to lead the NDP. And that will, again, change the makeup quite a bit in the House of Commons at the next election.
Absolutely. Well, Kris Sims, Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, thank you so much for joining us once again today on a busy day for you, but thanks for squeezing us into your schedule, and God bless you and your team and all you're trying to do for our country. We really appreciate it and appreciate your time with us today.
It means a lot to us. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.